Hello, and welcome to the GameDiscoverCo Show, your place to learn all about game discovery, what's going on in the video game business, and a whole bunch of other stuff, too. I am your co-host, Chris Plante, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Simon Carless. How are you doing today, Simon?
I'm doing good, thanks. It's an exciting new week. There's all the stuff going on in video game discovery and platform stuff, and we're willing to bring it to you. So that's awesome, right?
I love it. So here's how it goes for newcomers. We go through a series of smaller news stories, followed by one big meaty one, and we leave you with a clear understanding of what went on in the past week of game discovery and what is coming up this week, so you can seem like some sort of wizard or magician who knows things far ahead of time, and by far ahead I mean about 4 to 7 days.
Yeah, really far ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. Hey, you know what? If I had that and I could go to a casino, I would feel really good.
Good.
Let's dive right into the very first story and get things going. Number one, Helldivers 2 has been added to the PlayStation Plus game catalog 2.5 years after its original debut. How normal or not normal is this timeline for a game like this being added to PlayStation's catalog?
Yeah, I just thought this was interesting story to talk about because obviously Xbox over the past, 7 or 8 years has made a big thing of day one being the thing. And all along, PlayStation has been very much like, we're not sure this is a good idea. And in hindsight, yeah, it does seem like the fact that certainly Xbox has taken Call of Duty out of day one again now, for example, shows that it doesn't appear that this approach really worked. So it's interesting to see. I'll answer your question more directly. Like, a lot of the time, I think it's been like a year to a year and a half before sort of first party titles made it onto Game Catalog. And just as a reminder to everyone, Game Catalog is the slightly more expensive part of PlayStation Plus. There is a cheaper part where you just get PlayStation Plus Essential games, and there's less of those. But yeah, I think they've generally been waiting at least while they were dealing with Xbox as a competitor for like a year to a year and a half. And that's also for third-party games as well. Like there's very, very few. There's a handful of third-party games that will appear on PlayStation Plus in any form straight away nowadays. But in most cases they wait. But yeah, Helldivers 2 is even longer than some other first-party titles I've seen.
Maybe I am short-selling the audience here, but how is anybody supposed to know the difference between what is a pay game, what is a free-to-play game, and what is an included with some subscription game? Like, I'm not entirely sure what the business model is here anymore for a game like Helldivers 2 and how somebody maps it out from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, if this was a third party, then they would know. In this case, it obviously all feeds into revenue that Sony is getting anyway. But if this is a third party, then they would build in whatever they get. Like maybe big third party games have been getting an extra $10 million from Sony to be on PlayStation Plus at a particular time. Obviously, indies get far less than that, and that's sort of a number I don't know for sure. But in the end, I think, yeah, people are building that in because they're like, well, at this point, our game is already 50% off and we're selling, and there's definitely people who are interested, but we don't think all those people have the higher tier of PlayStation Plus, so it's fine. We're just going to put it in the higher tier of PlayStation Plus, get that lump sum. And just a reminder, that lump sum is net, which is quite exciting because otherwise, like if it's gross, then you're going to have the 30% platform cut and maybe some refunds as well. But if you're getting $10 million to be in PlayStation Plus, you're getting actually $10 million. So that's the other reason why people like these subscription services.
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit like trying to create some version of a long tail, like what the film studio had decades ago before streaming of first you're in a movie theater, then you are home video, rental, then direct sales home video, then cable TV, and so on and so forth. In terms of Sony knowing when to put it here, I was trying to figure out if this is a reflection of like a game's success versus its eventual player decline. And I was checking on SteamDB, which is not a perfect one-to-one here because these are the Steam numbers versus the PlayStation numbers, but they're still valuable. And Helldivers 2 had its second lowest month of all time in July, which sounds like that is a sign that things are going down, time for a boost. But it wasn't actually so different from the baseline that the game has had for a year between major updates. And its increase in August aligns with basically the same player spike that we saw in February. So is it, hey, the players are declining and we want to boost it? Is it just time for another marketing cycle? Like, what is inspiring a decision like this?
I mean, I think it's very much the argument that there's parallel audiences. And the parallel audiences, for example, being in Humble Monthly. Like, if you're in Humble Monthly and you put your Steam key in there, the argument, which I think is relatively sound, is this is an audience that might not, often doesn't know about your game, certainly wasn't so interested in it that it was going to go seek it out and buy it, even maybe at 50% off. So at that point, this is just another parallel audience to tap. And I think the argument is definitely for these games, being in PlayStation Plus game catalog is just an audience that you haven't accessed yet, and finding those audiences is good. But I do think my main takeaway from this, and what was interesting, is I think PlayStation is going to feel much freer about lengthening its first-party times before they put stuff into PlayStation Plus, because before I do feel like they were pressured by Xbox, and I think the pressure is kind of off on that side of things. And I think it does mean if they're going to be like Wolverine, like when are they going to put Wolverine in PlayStation Plus? Like when Xbox was talking everything's day one, they were probably pressured to put it in a year after, but maybe they'll wait even longer now because the economics make sense to do that.
Yeah, I mean, even with the Wolverine comparison, what I find so unusual about Helldivers 2, and was the problem that Xbox seemed to run into, is a game like Helldivers, one of these forever games, feels antithetical to a try a little of everything approach that, in theory, is the point of these subscription services. That you're playing a lot of different games. And it seems weird to have a game that is counter to, I guess, the on-paper reason that you would want to subscribe to a thing like PlayStation Plus. But maybe that is the idea of these are gamers who are only going to dip in, and they are not the hardcore gamers who are going to be playing just this and only this.
Yeah, and I also think there's going to be pressure to keep up their PlayStation Plus levels of subscription, and games, big games like this are always churn reducers, I suspect, because people are kind of like, well, I'm not going to churn out because there's this $60 game that I was kind of interested in that's only been $30 up to now is now available. So I do think the idea of churn reduction, you sort of have to put something in game catalog every month. But I agree with you. I agree with basically all what you said. If you try and apply business logic to when things should go in and out of subscriptions, it's actually very difficult.
Yeah. I want to get to the next two stories, which I can only describe as the siren songs sung in harmony, and that they seem to be appealing to a lot of people, and also are making my ears bleed when I hear them. They are making me extremely anxious on the consumer end, but I'm curious about where your head is at on the business end. And this will start with paid mods. Mod.io is making a bigger push into this space. Do you want to give kind of a top-level summary of what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, there's a couple of new school companies who do mod tools for people, and mod.io is one of the leading ones. And historically, they've done a really good job of sort of hosting people's mods, like devs mods and players mods, and they have a pretty robust catalog. But obviously, they've been VC funded, and I think the end point of this is they do need to generate, I think, some long-term value, and the idea of paid mods, which has been, I think, is both intriguing and controversial, is something they're dipping back into now. And they have noted, they have a more casual BMX game called BMX Streets, and they're noting that it has a $10 average revenue per paying user for folks who are willing to dip into the paid mods right now. And I think paid mods for BMX games, for example, where there's like new tracks and stuff, kind of makes sense. But there's obviously been a rich history of a lot of content being free and then maybe being monetized other ways, like Patreons. And I think it is still difficult to work out what the right angle is where you're not going to get backlash, given the rich history of backlash against paid mods.
Yes, I want to get into that backlash in just a second, and kind of my queasiness, while also recognizing like people should get paid for things that they make if they would like to do that. But first, how much bigger of a story is this than just Mod.io? Because we've seen the power of, obviously, Roblox allowing amateurs to sell media, to sell effectively mods, if you would want to call that. I don't know. The difference between a mod and a game maker tool is tricky here. We've also heard Tim Sweeney talk about making these transferable media between games and bringing users into that environment to be able to make things and then make money. Is this what video game execs are starting to see as the future? Games becoming the storefronts themselves?
Yes and no. I mean, I think there is a lot more. The rise of UGC is definitely happening, and definitely, obviously Roblox never had any games made by Roblox. Roblox was always 100% UGC. I think people are interested in it. I think the problem has been in the PC and console market, where games are sort of predominantly paid, by revenue. Perhaps there's big free-to-play revenue, but the free-to-play is concentrated in a very specific set of games. So if you're trying to make new stuff, a lot of people are making it in the in the paid up front space, and in general consumers of paid up front are willing to pay for DLC, but they've been nervous of paying for user created DLC, especially because there's these, Steam Workshop has been around for a long time, and they are kind of like, well, people are giving this to me for free, why am I going to give the game publishers or developers a cut of it in addition to the creator, I guess. And also trying to introduce paid mods where there's already been a rich history of free mods can be complicated. I don't think it's an outlandish idea, but there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of like chatter about it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, whenever trends like this come around, I always fear being old man yelling at cloud. And I definitely recognize the emphasis on mod culture not making money, of it being like a communal thing, is a very Gen X, maybe elder millennial way of seeing things that is selling out. Do Gen Z gamers see things this way at all, or have being raised on Roblox and UGC in that format, is this just kind of the norm for them?
I mean, I think what's really happening, if I think about it, is younger gamers are buying cheap games that are standalone and are sort of UGC-like in some cases. The rise of Friendslop, right? Friendslop, you could argue Friendslop could be, it's really a series of $7 standalone games using popular engines that are kind of like mods on ideas of stuff anyway. So I suspect what's happening is that's happening, and people are just comfortable with paying smaller amounts of money for bite-sized chunks of stuff, but they're actually most comfortable with doing that as standalone games. So I think it is difficult to leverage in sometimes if a game is normally $20 or $30 and it's got a slightly older audience. Kind of levering in that paid UGC can be tricky. But I also think I don't think Mod.io is silly to want to approach this, because there's plenty of games that have, like RimWorld is a great example of a game that has a lot of very nice first party DLC that conceivably could be made by modders. So there's no conceptual reason why RimWorld couldn't have multiple $10 or $20 mods made by third parties. It's just how do you? I think creating the marketplace, the open marketplace, is sort of the bit where then people start to go, like the more the older gamers go, oh, hang on, what's going on here, right? I also apologize when you said Friendslop. My desk weight fell on my foot, and it looked like I was really offended by the very idea of Friendslop. I want to be clear. Love Friendslop, and I don't even mind the name that much. I do have one last question on this, which is like what you're talking about with the marketplace coming around, and
people starting to get suspicious, which is, I'm just going to give you like the worst conspiracy theory of all of this, which is, are we going to see more game publishers prioritizing UGC tools and distribution as a way to avoid hiring professional labor?
I do not think so, because I think that, frankly, the amount of UGC that's actually going to be successful that is paid is relatively low at this point. And I'm not 100% convinced this is going to work. I think, it's going to be interesting, right? The Sims is doing this right now, and The Sims, since The Sims is free to play nowadays, The Sims is well positioned to do this, and so The Sims 4 has started this sort of new marketplace thing, and so I think looking at games like The Sims 4 and seeing how it goes, it also has a more casual audience, I think, who are listening a little bit less sometimes to apocalyptic discussion.
Yes.
Yes. So I think The Sims 4 will be a good idea, but I don't personally see EA saying, oh well, there's so much good paid UGC now, we're going to slim down the Sims team. But I guess you never know. But I think the game industry has far greater issues with other reasons to slim down dev teams that are not related to UGC, I guess is what I'd say.
That's totally fair. I want to get into the last of the smaller stories, which is, this is a story from Doug Shapiro. It's a trends piece on why, quote, in recent years, almost all the value created in media has accrued to those who distribute content, not create or package it, but AI may partially uncouple distribution and coordination in media by introducing a new intermediary layer. That might sound like a lot of jargon when spoken out loud, but is pretty substantial. Can you put this in layperson terms?
Yeah, I mean, this guy, Doug Shapiro, who's an ex kind of media, I think, strategy guy, is like the biggest big brain guy that I know on this stuff. And so I definitely recommend people read his Substack. He has a Substack, and some of it is paid, some of it is free, but you can get a chunk of it before it goes paid. And I also had trouble. This is so big brain that I had some trouble myself on this. But I think basically what it's saying is, at least, let's take streaming services as an example. Like what's obviously been happening is, certainly streaming services have been making more money than people making programs. This sort of is argument, certainly profit-wise. Certainly Netflix is a great example of that. And then obviously what's been happening in general is people go on Netflix and they're like, what am I going to watch on Netflix? But his argument, I think, is maybe over time, people are going to think about what they want to watch by asking something else, like their AI tools. And then so that means that AI tools are going to be in charge, essentially, of directing them to services where they will watch things or listen to things. And, and I think that's actually not, I mean, this is not a short-term thing, but I think this is not outlandish, especially in, let's say, the the streaming TV and movie space and YouTube. I think that's a reasonable thing to suggest. And so I think his question is, what happens if AI companies do have, control over where they're suggesting people go? And this is also an issue for games, obviously.
I am immensely skeptical of this, but I want to kind of talk it through with you, because yes, I agree this idea, the core premise that the tech companies have succeeded by being both distributor and kind of presenter or curator, spot on. Like, that's the Google effect. That is Netflix saying we don't really need to market our movies. Our goal is actually for you just to feel like you have to turn on Netflix and go looking for something to watch, that it's valuable for them to capture you in the scroll as much as it is to have you watching movies. That's all spot on. But the idea that AI will be able to interfere relies on that premise that people will have such a positive experience and a rewarding experience with AI guiding them into what they should watch, that they will no longer feel like they need to Netflix scroll. And that would be incredible, if possible, but it would mean that it would need to be better than all human-written content that has been trying to do that at every major publication for the last 20 years, which is possible. Though I will say, if you Google, what should I watch tonight, you will get some real AI fake brain hallucinations quite regularly. But the other thing that I think it's competing against that I don't think I saw in the article is the fact that Apple has been trying to do this for as long as the Apple TV has existed. The Apple TV's hope was that they could interfere and that they would have all of your streaming services feeding into a single curation platform, and that the Apple TV would itself become that curation layer, not just the means of distribution, not just the pipes. And it is completely failed. Like, that is not Apple's great success. So it's not that this isn't possible, but I think it would mean that AI would have to achieve things that one of the biggest tech companies has itself not been able to achieve up until this point, throwing massive amounts of money and resources at it, and all of media has not been able to achieve up until this point. But please correct me if you think I'm totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, one comment I'd have is that he did say partially uncouple, so I do not think he's claiming this will be a complete change. I also think in games, I'm not convinced this will have a massive effect, even if it does happen, because in the end, we sort of have one PC platform, and it's Steam, and the sort of the consoles, and then the mobiles platform is based on what phone you have generally. Is it iPhone or is it? And well, I mean, there's some variant on Android stores, but yeah, but what I do think is, I do think the concept. I don't think this is going to be to be clear, hey AI, what should I watch today? I don't think everyone's going to be doing that. But I do think the idea that AI recommendations make their way into maybe some kind of central platform, like maybe in a few years, maybe you'll open Google and your Google homepage, which many of us will search on Google, will have some AI recommended things for, hey, here's some games you should check out, here's some movies you should check out, and I think particularly in the movie space, like I don't know if you find this, I try to watch specific movies sometimes, and it drives me crazy to work out which streaming service they're available on, particularly because Netflix has fake pages set up for most movies people want to search for when it is in fact not available. So I think there is sort of a problem in search of a solution here. I don't think it applies much for games, but I actually think it's really interesting to discuss because I don't think, to be clear, I don't think AI in the future, maybe AI just looks like extreme personalization in the end. But I think there are some problems about how people find content, and the idea that these large AI companies could be a layer where people find content. I mean, I'm already seeing to GameDiscoverCo in my Google referrers. I am seeing some ChatGPT. So it's clear to me that there is a small amount of this stuff happening already. So I think that's just something to think about. I do agree with you that the idea that you would just wholesale say, hey, what should I watch today? I don't think people are going to do that on like a daily basis.
Yeah, I do agree with you also that like it is unquestionably a problem. Like the Netflix scroll is a thing. It's more of I wonder how much the solutions are having to compete with the fact that the distributors want that problem to persist, that they benefit from you scrolling forever, the kind of like dating app effect. But there's one other thing that I want to pick at here, and then I promise we'll get into the big story. But how did we get here? And by here, I mean, the other part of the story was people who made things used to make money. And the like very top level idea of this big brain piece is that most money is going into the giants, right? The distribution has it. And it just feels like the future that we're now predicting is not a return to creators making money, but will one giant now have to fight a new other giant? And is that what we're heading towards? Is there a scenario where creators are making money, or is it like keep hoping for like direct payment and Patreon to be kind of an alternate to the reality? And the reality is Godzilla and Mecha Godzilla are going to destroy the city.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get too dystopian in my newsletter or this podcast, but you make you make a fair point here, which is yeah, I mean, it's absolutely an issue. Like the issue is, I was just watching YouTube yesterday, and some guy who runs like a machine shop for farm implements in the middle of America I was recommended a very interesting video by him that has like 700,000 views in like 4 days. And he is not a professional creator. I think he's been getting some new,
Yeah.
he's been getting new orders because of it. But it's just, we are in this stage where like, yeah, instant global distribution of anything you film or make is a thing. And it means that, yeah, the algorithms are deciding a lot of the time whether it's popular, and this doesn't really accrue to people who do it professionally. I mean, I think, you know, I quietly coined the deprofessionalization of games, but never talked about it a lot. And then some other people talked about it, and everyone was like, but but yeah, I mean, I think certainly the deprofessionalization of this thing means anyone can make anything. It also means, if you can, to your point, if you can build up a fan base and you have direct monetization, then maybe you'll be in good shape. I see a lot of YouTubers nowadays, and I watch their videos, and they will get ad money or subscription money from me because of it, because I have YouTube, I have the paid bit of YouTube. But in addition, I go check out their Patreons quite often, and they do have like, they make decent money on their Patreon, but they're only putting out a video once every couple of months. And, you know, it's not, you know, no one's retiring rich, but it's, you know, I mean, it works. So I think the answer is, yes, we are at the stage where just very giant corporate platforms are fighting over who gets to direct the mass of people, unfortunately. But I do think there's ways, if you're realistic, you can scale your business or your passion so it makes sense for you. I guess that's always I always have. I was on a podcast with Rami Ismail and Mike Rose the other day, and that was Rami's final question to me, very similar. You know, are we doomed to be unsustainable? And I tend to take the glass half full view, which is you can make things work. But yeah, it isn't necessarily, you know, based on these kind of trends, games is not going to be, you know, sign up for a job in an office for the next 40 years. It's going to be a bit more hard scrabble than that.
Yes. Well, I thank you for giving me a space to have therapy for this week. Also, I the goal was to, you know, I got to bring everybody low so I can build them back up. Apparently, I sound very abusive right now. But I do want to build. I want to build up. I think there actually is good things happening, and I think there are people working hard to solve the things that we were actually just talking about, which is how do we make people aware of what is out there? How do we claw back some of our control over the curation, if not outright the distribution of games? And one of the answers is showcases, and that is our big story this week. This is about all the big showcases. You have some great data and rankings, fair to say rankings, of what are the most popular, the most successful, the most viable gaming showcases out there. And before we get into what those are, you have 5 points on what makes an event successful for a game announcement, or a promotion. How did you come up with those?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at showcases for a while, and part of the reason we did this newsletter is there is, within GameDiscoverCo Pro, we just rolled out something where we have a few hundred showcases, and we sort of map it to people's pre-release wish list. So you can see, if you were in a showcase, did it have any effect? But while I've been gathering this data, I've sort of noticed some interesting, I think, things that really, if you're a dev and you want to be in a showcase, what should you be asking people? And just very briefly, those things are, how many games are there in the showcase? What's the situation around co-streaming, i.e. getting other Twitch or YouTube folks to also stream the showcase? How many reveals are planned, and how many are of this trailers are sort of like fourth trailer from a game you might have already seen? What's the cost? Obviously, the cost varies immensely. And how long is the showcase? Because I think this is also really important.
Yes. So I don't think it will surprise people that the Game Awards is the top of the list, in that Summer Game Fest comes right after that. The III initiative coming after those two is not certainly what I would have guessed if I was making a bet. What about it stands out? Why is it so high on the list?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we basically looked at everything I think in the last year, and the Triple I initiative, which is put together by some folks who are kind of indies themselves, has ended up doing quite well. Like, well, I'd say I described them as scrappy in the newsletter, and they were just kind of they were kind of like, what does scrappy mean? And I just sort of meant that they're not, unlike Jeff Keighley will go to Japan and he'll go and visit Sega and they'll talk about which massive Sega IP they can reveal. The Triple I is not like that. That they basically know a lot of, I'd say, newer sort of newer kind of maybe slightly less expensive but really interesting high hook idea companies, publishers, developers. So they're very much looking around, and they're very, also the difference with Triple I is that a number of people in there do pay money, and it is, I think, not inexpensive to be in there, but they've also handpicked, I think, a bunch of kind of buzzy games that they have not been revealed before. So they had quite a lot of debuts in this year's. They had and they had a lot of kind of, I think, interesting games. So I think that's why they've done a good job of sort of being higher up the rankings. Their median number of wishlists added in the last 7 days was actually, I'd say, 3 times what a lot of the regular showcases are. Although I will tell you, some other people who do those regular showcases approached me afterwards and were pointing out that there's all kinds of things about. So some of these have pre-shows. So should you include the pre-show games in the main showcase numbers, even though it's a slightly different name? So I think we'll do some tweaking on some of these numbers. But I would say, I think Triple I has been impressive. Also partly because it's once a year so far. They may or may not be thinking about more, I think, but because it's once a year, they can really stack it. And I think almost everyone else who does showcases, even Jeff Keighley, obviously. I mean, Jeff really has 3 showcases at this point, and then folks like PC Gaming Show or Future have a lot more than that. So if you have one per year, you can kind of stack a lot more interesting stuff into it.
There's one other one that I want to dig into because I was a little surprised to see it as high, which is at number 4 is the Xbox Games Showcase. And Xbox, like my Kansas City Royals, are going through what I would call a rebuild. So I was a little surprised to see them so high. They're above Gamescom. They're above the PlayStation State of Plays. What is making that showcase work?
Well, it does have a few less games than the others. I think it has less than 30, so there may be some big hitter first-party stuff in there as well, so that probably helps. The other thing to note, though, is it is in the June timeframe, and I think what does happen is, and remember, if you're coming out on Xbox as well, like Xbox is not charging money for these. So if you're kind of like, we really need to be in a June showcase, and you're a big company, then I think Xbox and PlayStation do sometimes get your attention for some of your games because it's a marketing expense for Xbox and PlayStation if you're going to appear on their console. Whereas, obviously, if you're appearing in another showcase, you will have to pay for it. Sometimes quite a bit of money. So I think some big publishers will spread their bets at that point. So I suspect what's happening is, I haven't looked in a lot of detail. There's a bunch of first party stuff in there. There's not much small stuff, and the stuff that does exist is often parceled out from some of the biggest publishers. They want to put one of their games maybe in Xbox, one in PlayStation, and one in a Jeff Keighley event or something. So I think that's what's really happening. But I do think, with there only being 28 games in there, I don't think there was much smaller stuff at all, and so that probably helps its numbers.
The ranking that you have, I think, is interesting because it's like, it is fun to rank things, but you yourself have said, there's more to think about for a developer when they're deciding what showcase to pursue. So how should developers be thinking about events depending on the size of their game or the size of their budget or their window to release? Like, what can they see in this data that's going to help them?
Yeah, I did say specifically, like, don't be. I just want to be in the one with the highest median wish list increase on Steam, because it may not suit your game. I think, and there is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy thing here. Like Jeff Keighley doesn't put stuff in his showcases that he doesn't think people are going to be super excited by. So I think, yeah, I think that's definitely true. I do think looking at vibes is important, and I sort of throw that out. I don't know if there's there's an easy way to gauge vibes necessarily besides just looking at a bunch of the games, but there's some obvious ones, like there's the Wholesome Direct, and if you're a cozy game, Wholesome Direct has got to be a long way up your list. And Triple I, if I was sort of like maybe a high hook friend slot adjacent game or something that has a really interesting idea in it, I'd be looking at Triple I. I think PC Gaming Show is really good. I think if you have a core PC game, I definitely feel like, I'm stereotyping, but PC gamer readers are quite core kind of PC, and so that makes sense. Future Game Show has a good set of I think all kinds of games fit well in that, and there's also the Mix, which is tied up with physical showcases. So if you want to be in a physical digital showcase, then I think the Mix is good for that. There's a showcase called Galaxies, which I think is a bit more up and coming, but uses Twitch co-streaming heavily. So if you feel like Twitch is sort of your oeuvre, you think you're going very popular on Twitch, you might want to look at Galaxies. So I don't know. I mean, it's quite vibe based, and I also need to be quite careful, because in the past I try not to rank stuff too much now, because I feel like all the people who do the showcases come to me and are like, "Are you sure about that ranking?" So I think let's think of this less as ranked and more as there's vibes, and you want to pick the showcase that fits your vibe as a game the best.
The way that I walked away from reading it was, it's a lot like picking a college or a university, which is, everybody would love to go to Harvard. Sure, it's great. Not everybody, but a lot of people would. It seems to guarantee, or at least promise, a certain level of success. Things can go wrong, but odds are high after college, right? But depending on what you want to achieve and what your interests are, a very small university with a program focused on what you do could be a far better fit, and it could be a lot cheaper, and it could set you up to be where you need to be. And once I started to think about it like that, it was a lot easier for me to see why I wouldn't necessarily want to be in the biggest thing possible, because it is just so tempting to think that the biggest thing is the best thing.
Yeah, and obviously let's not forget, you can be in 3 or 4 or 5 showcases, and so there's really no reason not to be in showcases as long as they're not prohibitively expensive and you can show something interesting. My only final comment is, you do have to watch, when showcases get long, there was one famously that was 3.5 hours long, but it was a bit of an experiment, I think, that then people will tune out and people will start to curse showcases, especially if it's like the 4th trailer for a game that you've seen already. And so I do think that both trailer makers and people need to think about not overusing these, because it will degrade their whole potency over time.
Yes. Well, that wraps up the big story. I do want to get into our final bits. Let's talk about last week in games, this week in games. Catch me up. What happened last week? How's the industry doing? It's still alive?
Yeah, it was actually a fairly busy week. I was noting here there were quite a lot of games. I mean, for me, launching on Steam with more than 2,000 concurrents is quite good. It probably means you're going to sell 40 or 50,000 copies in your first week, and eventually sell more than that. And there were 15 games that did that. But at the very top, there were 3 games I wanted to mention, and those were Hell Let Loose Vietnam is the latest in the Hell Let Loose series. Yeah. Pretty serious, slightly more expensive, tactical shooter. It's doing pretty good. Yeah, it went out to 30,000 CCU, and it's selling. I looked at our console numbers for it, and it's selling on console as well. So it's pretty well executed. There were some complaints at launch over servers and some other stuff, but I think it's well executed. Servant of the Lake is the latest from the Rusty Lake folks, who do these really interesting puzzle games, sort of 2D puzzle adventure games. They have a very odd niche, but people really love them. And it had 28,000 CCU at 97% positive. So that's wonderful, especially because it's a short game. Yeah. So people really love that, and they'll keep doing their thing. And then there's a game called Sandustry, which is sort of like an automation-y sandboxy kind of game, which has really basic 2D art. I think I did say it wasn't the prettiest baby, was what was sort of my quote on there. But people love these games that are really detailed and sort of very. It's got pixely, physicsy kind of automation-y stuff going on, and I think people forget games like that can do great, and it's almost at 10,000 CCU, and people have been really enjoying it. So those are the three key ones from last week I think I want to talk about.
For this upcoming week, we're going to play a little bit of a game, which is I'm going to see if a single game you mention is on the Steam calendar, the personalized calendar that it has for me based off of my interest, and see just how much of a bubble I live in. I'm going to remove one game up top because I do think it will be there. I think Mortal Shell 2 will be a game that you have loaded up, but let's see if I am right on this.
Yes, it is in fact the top game, and we had it about 900,000 wish lists, and it's actually now in advanced access. So if you want to pay an extra $10 and get some random skins but play it early, then people are doing that. and actually someone donated, I think the publisher donated a key to SteamDB, so we can see basically SteamDB and us can't see its concurrent users unless someone donates a key during advanced access, and so someone did, and it's about 18,000 CCU already. So we're going to track it when it comes out properly. But yeah, it's clearly doing very well. So yeah, that's number one. The other stuff I have is Steins Gate Reboot, which is that on your list? I'm guessing not.
It's not, and I'm actually confused why it's not, because that sounds very much like my shit, and I didn't know that it was coming out.
Oh,
this
really?
week.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's like a visual novel, like reboot thing. Anyhow, 450K.
Yes.
I think it's got a lot of Asian wish lists though, so that's probably why. I think it's less noticed in the West. And then there's a game called The Sinking City, The Lantern of the Laughless Saint, Vacation Cafe Simulator, Hearth and Hamlet were the other ones that I had just listed in here. But I don't know, do you have any of those?
This is a perfect example of how strange curation is, in that the stuff that I'm being recommended, I got Entropy, I got Slayblade, which looks like whatever that game was that people younger than me played.
Oh, it is a Beyblade. Yeah, I've talked about that before. Yeah. Slayblade is like a Beyblade roguelike, I think, or something.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah.
But the fact that Sinking City isn't even on here, which is a game that I'm also excited for and was reminded is coming out because the reviews just hit. It just shows how hard it is to curate these dang things. And yet, there's a lot here that is curated for me, like the theropods. It looks sick. So it's not like I'm wanting for games. There's even a game coming out called Brigador Killers that has some Crusader No Remorse vibes, which truly, retro is back in every way when you have people tackling that corner of old school PC gaming.
I think that's a sequel to Brigador. That's probably the sequel to Brigador, and Brigador was a game that I think famously did kind of badly, and then the dev talked about how upset he was that it did badly, but then that meant it did quite well because everyone was like, "Oh, this game's actually good." So that is the classic, the classic thing you can do, or used to better do. I don't know, maybe too many games to do badly now that you can't do it, but this was a while ago. But yeah, that's cool.
My. Well, I do want to wrap things up. This is where I get to ask my question, totally unknown to you, which is this week, what is going on with the rise of what I can only describe as tidy-up games or organization games? And also, has the line between homage and outright stealing just completely dissolved?
You're particularly talking about these these librarian games where you have to tidy up like 4,000 books in a particular area. So basically what happened was there was that big breakout for this. What was it? Librarian tidy up the arcane library or something. Basically, I think what happened is people making first-person job simulators realized that this is now a genre, and so we're getting a string of tidy up the X in different themes. Here's why it makes sense to me, because that tidy up game is extremely finite. You tidy it up and you're done, or maybe you get like 4 hours to tidy it up and you're like, I've tidied it up enough. So in terms of people wanting to spend another $8 or $10 to do that again, actually that's really interesting to people. So yeah, I mean, this is the question about how much is it a rip-off if you just do that. I mean, for me, I don't really have a problem with it. I just think it's like a genre at this point. I know someone only
Yeah.
just invented it, but now and there have been other. I mean, clearly there's been cleanup simulator stuff. Power Wash Sim is pretty obvious, and there was a game called Viscera Cleanup Simulator from a very long time ago that was
Yeah,
famous
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. But this particular tidy up, which is there's a lot of random objects all over a 3D space, and you have to sort of manually arrange them. I just think it's a subgenre now, for better or
Yep.
worse, and I think people don't. I mean, this obviously. This question of how homage can you get and feel ethical came up in our newsletter on Friday about Iron Nest, because Iron Nest has just done
Yeah.
very well, and I sort of had to talk about at the end of it. It was made after PVKK was revealed, and the devs were basically like, "We really like PVKK. We're going to do something quite similar but a bit different." And
Yeah.
there is a question, I guess, of I don't know, ethics or whether you think that's a fair thing to do. And I've sort of come to the conclusion that it's probably okay. I
Well,
don't know if I would personally do it, but it's not, there's far worse things out there on the
it
internet
is where
nowadays.
like I also land on like the generational thing of like we talked about this a lot of expectations being different for a new group of game designers and players. And just on I'm looking at on August 14th, we got TV Archive tidying up together, where you are tidying up looks like VHS tapes and Blu-rays, and tidy up together normal. I guess this is a different one, which is a multiplayer tidy up game. But what this reminds me more of is trends that you would see on Roblox, where
Right.
like a thing pops and then you just see a ton of them immediately, that are just, like here's the Peter Griffin version because that's what you're looking for. So it does feel like a bit of a trend breaking containment here a little bit. Not in necessarily a bad way. It's just, yeah, it's just a little strange and new, and I'm impressed how fast people have moved on it, because it has, even compared to maybe the Vampire Crawlers trend, it feels like this one has moved it at just absolutely lightning crack speed.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is barrier to entries issues, right? You don't see a lot of really
Yeah.
complex automation games getting cloned because they're really freaking difficult to make, and this one has one of the lowest barriers to entry you could possibly have. So I think that's why you see people jumping on this. I do think it's also cultural. I was, we did GDC China in China for a while, and I was really interested. The Chinese culturally see, I think, copies of things as a homage to them. That's like a cultural thing. And it is seen far less negatively, like emperors of China would do things that were contemporary and copies of things that were hundreds of years before, and it was considered largely very positive. So I do think. I mean, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
that's a regional cultural thing, but I think you're right. I think people are saying this is okay, and also the conclusion I came to. On PVKK and Iron Nest was, I looked around in the comments a lot. Like no one is saying those Iron Nest guys, like, what are they doing? But partly because
Yeah.
PVKK has been kind of a bit delayed, so I
Yeah.
think people are happy to play something in the meantime. But people are very happy to lap up additional stuff in that, what I believe is now a subgenre. So I think we just all have to get more okay with it being okay.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. The only note that I would say, my guidance as somebody in the press would be like, maybe don't show your game too early, because the other example of this that I think of is body cam first-person shooters,
Right.
and the game that launched that subgenre still isn't out. But a whole bunch of other ones are, and have kind of like, I don't know, I feel like we've almost run a course through that entire subgenre at this point.
Yeah, I did say that in the newsletter. I think PVKK in the end would probably conclude that they revealed it a little bit early, but it actually took 2 years for Iron Nest to come out after PVKK revealed. So that was not a fast follow. That was a slow follow.
Yeah. I also wonder with Big Walk and how much of FriendSwap was inspired by those early trailers. I think
Yep.
it is definitely a thing that is happening, of the agile can get to market the fastest. Cool. Well, I think that is it. That's a full, meaty episode. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the show, recommend it to a friend. It goes a long way in making it more widely available and keeping it going. Until next time, I am Chris Plante, and Simon, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, have a nice week, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye.